Coming to you from the Varsity Sports Bar and Grill on Beachmont Avenue in Anderson Township, another special edition. Not only a special edition, but a Sunday edition of the One More and I'm Out of Here podcast. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Carroll. First one of the day. And Rob Herking behind you sits a rather large studio audience today. Give yourselves a round of applause, if you would, please, for this special edition of the One More and I'm Out of Here podcast.
I'm not looking. A couple of those people
don't look. No, you don't want to look.
Don't act like that's your first
you don't want to see.
Dan.
You don't want to see their facial expressions.
That's fine. Just let me know if somebody comes up on me. You won't.
No, I will not say a word.
You won't.
So you're all free to do over there to him whatever you want.
Couple of Marines in the house. Bunch of supporters of the podcast, Dan, and I think everybody here all said bullshit when you said first one of the day. We know what you wake up to on Sundays.
Well, I mean, it's the first one I cracked open today. I had a draft beer. I had one draft beer as we were preparing for the podcast.
We're joined by Jason Kiefer, the fireman, still not working.
X-rays, August 7th. X-rays, August 7th. Yeah. She'll be back after that.
Get everything back in one piece in there.
So when he is
Thank
working,
God.
He doesn't work as a fireman. I mean, it's not. Postal workers, they work all the time. Rain, sleet,
not all of us can have 8112 Beachmont. The Varsity as a secondary office. Being a self-employed attorney, so
I just need to figure out how to write off that booth.
I'm just trying to figure out when you're going to employ your son to where you're now the Avalon lawyer, where he's driving you around and you're in the back seat.
Yeah, as I tell him, don't speed through this town. It's a speed trap, and I get a fucking ticket the next day driving through that town from the same county. Is somebody going to introduce this guy?
Yes.
I don't know who he is.
We are joined by, you go by Christian or Chris? What's
Chris.
better?
Yeah, just call me Chris.
Chris Bussler.
Chris, all right.
Retired gunnery sergeant from the United States Marine Corps, who wrote a absolutely fantastic book called No Tougher Duty, No Greater Honor. And I was telling him before the podcast, I told these guys, I finished it the other night, and I've never closed a book and just said, that is absolutely incredible.
That's because you normally don't read them from start to finish, Keith. That's why.
Well, I like to think that I can do Braille, but I can't.
I mean, he closes at page 10. That's unbelievable. No, what's unbelievable is he's going to finish the rest of the book.
The question is, did you finish the book? No.
I'm
no,
20 pages short.
Don't
Keith.
lie.
Damn
Don't
it.
lie.
I had a rough day yesterday. God bless.
No, it was just an absolute stellar read. I mean, easy to go through, but you felt like, and he's obviously going to go through and explain the book, but I literally felt like I was over his shoulder while he was doing all the things he was doing. And it's a story that never, at least for me, I've never heard. We always hear the shoot 'em up stories, you know, these guys pinned down and we were in this battle, but the guys that lost their lives, this guy and his team are the ones that brought those heroes home. And I think that is just absolutely riveting.
And him and his team were also on the front lines, risking losing their lives.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit with Chris.
I do want to throw a quick shout out to Dexter Pitts.
Yes. Thanks,
who had him on his podcast and shot him to us. And, you know, Chris was nice enough to A, accept the text message. B, wanted to be here in person versus doing it virtually, which I think is even better. We get to meet his beautiful wife, Wendy.
Wendy's in the house.
So
she puts up with this shit.
We appreciate you being here, my man.
So can we get a round of applause for our guest today, Chris Bussler?
Thank you.
Chris, thanks for being here. I'll start off with the first question.
Sure.
3 tours of duty.
Yes, sir.
And make sure you talk right into that.
I would think
Yes,
that
sir.
one tour of duty
You got to get up on that like the major.
is enough for a book. You did 3 tours. And I know there's a lot of guys who did multiple tours. But I don't know that I've ever really had a chance to talk to guys who have done multiple tours. What goes into that kind of thinking when you say, yes, I am willing to go back again?
For me, it was I wanted to be with my guys. If my guys were going back forward, I wanted to be there next to them. I wanted to be for me, once you commit yourself to be a leader, it doesn't quit. It doesn't end whenever you get home. You have to be a leader 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And for me, being there with them in the middle of combat, to be there next to them was everything to me. Sorry to say, family comes second when you got people's lives on the line. You put them on the back burner, and you got to put all your attention, your heart, your soul into keeping these guys trained up, keeping these guys fed, keeping them watered, keeping them disciplined. Because once it's game time, you're out there on the front lines. It's not a game. I mean, it's real. And when lives are exposed to enemy fire, it's real lives that die. So it's real people that suffer through that. And I wanted to be there next to them to suffer through that hell. And,
I remember in your book, Chris, you had talked, I believe, I can't remember the second tour or third tour, that if so-and-so, you had a group though that you made a pact with. If one of them re-upped, you were going to re-up with them.
It was,
how many were in your group? And was it the whole unit or?
There was 30, I believe it was 37 of us when we first went out to my first tour. And then there was the core bunch of guys, a lot of the NCOs, non-commissioned officers. So your corporals, your sergeants, even the staff, we were a tight knit group. Even during peacetime, we're the same guys who were volunteering for funeral duties, the ball details for, what was that? We would take kids out and put them through like a miniature boot camp and try to take these inner city kids and show them discipline and stuff. So we were always volunteering for different extra things. And we always took the role seriously. We knew that before the war, we were the only mortuary affairs group in the entire Marine Corps, active duty or reserves. So we knew that after 9/11, our chances of going to combat was real. So we took all the training evolution seriously. And when we went forward, we were dedicated to the fight. So there was probably maybe 15, 20 of us. There was this hardcore, keeping it real. And then there was the troops who wanted to be there too.
Yeah, because I didn't know if it was like three of you that you guys were very tight. So it was more than that.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
So we had the thing with
that increases your odds of going back.
It does increase your odds of going back. But what we found out, and I did not know until probably on my third tour, the unit that I was with, we really didn't take a whole lot of casualties compared to a lot of other units, because I found out that when you first get on the ground, the bad guys will test the units. And so the units that didn't respond, and they weren't professional, they were very lax, those guys got chewed up. And the guys who were disciplined and they were hardcore, they returned fire, immediately. And those guys didn't get messed with. So the bad guys were determining where they can most effectively, hit. And it's just my unit. We didn't take a whole lot of casualties. We got a lot of guys wounded, but we didn't really take a whole lot of KIAs. And I think that just goes back to the peacetime, and how seriously we took the training. Our leaders that brought us up in the unit, a lot of those guys were active duty guys, and a lot of the guys had real world experience through the Gulf War. Some guys served in Haiti. I remember one guy that came in and served in Somalia. So they took it seriously, and he drilled in our heads that once it's time to show up, you better show out, because stuff's real.
Well, you mentioned active. You were reserve.
I was
correct?
a reservist.
Marine reserve.
Yeah, I grew up in the military.
Yeah.
So when I grew up, I knew I wanted to serve, but I didn't want to be always never home. I didn't have a home until I was, in high school, because every 3 or 4 years we'd pick up and move.
Mm-hmm.
So Japan, South Carolina, I've been to the Philippines, Thailand, Illinois, born in New Jersey. So by the time I hit high school, I was like, well, I want to have a family and experience this part of America that I didn't know existed.
Why did you move a lot?
My dad was in the Air Force. So he was they used to call him SAC, Strategic Air Command. So he used to, refuel F-4 fighter jets back in the 70s and 80s. And then when the F-16s came out, he did that at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. And he used to say that he joined up in the Air Force when the Air Force was hardcore, back when they used to qualify on the ranges and stuff. He joined the Air Force back in like 63 or 64. And he spent 23 years in, retired out, and got a job as a mailman in Springfield, Ohio. And
he was back when they weren't sleeping on nice mattresses, getting steak dinners.
Yeah.
I got to say, my time in the Air Force, we had it a lot better than the Marines did. I can tell you that.
And that's why I went there.
Yeah. He used to talk about. He used to have to go to TDY over in the Vietnam during the Vietnam War. He spent 3 tours there. I met my mom over there and married and stuff. And he used to talk about sappers coming in and, blowing themselves up at different parts of the bases. And he had photographs of dug in fighting in positions with RPGs and all that kind of stuff. So I grew up, my dad was my hero. He served in the military. My grandfather served during World War II, and my granduncles, one landed on Omaha Beach, fought his way to Bastogne before he got, wounded and medevaced out. And so, for me, joining in the military, that's something that you do to pay back to your country of your origin. Everybody has to serve at least one tour in, and I just ended up making a career out of it.
Nice.
Yeah. I think what you're doing now, you're here talking to us about your time in the service. It seems to me like your dad talked to you about it or related some of what happened to him in the service. How important do you think that is to you, to your family, to your dad, to be able to do that? Because there's a lot of guys who can't do that, who can't talk about their time in the service, and it winds up eating them up inside.
Right.
And Dexter Pitts was a guy like that. He had his own struggles. If you read his book, which is really, really good too. But I think what you're doing now and being on this show, being on other shows and guys like you is a really important thing. I mean, what's your take on it?
I think that for me, I had to start somewhere. And I think the military is always a great place to start a life, even if people, I think it's a place where people should be invested in their country, not necessarily have to serve in the military, but I think everybody should do something to better the country that we live in.
Sounds like a conversation we had recently.
I think everybody should serve.
Yeah.
Politicians.
I think everybody should serve, in some sort of capacity, whether it's community service, firefighters, police, EMT.
He's a firefighter. I'm not.
Definitely.
I think everybody should be invested in the country and have some love and some skin in the game to make this a better place.
I think it was the mustache, by the way, Chris, that threw you off on the firefighter thing.
You probably.
I look like I'm getting ready to do a Skyline commercial. Love the cheese, love the chili. But we were just talking about this with politicians. Back in the old days, they go into politics to make the country a better place, not to become millionaires. And it seems like nowadays a lot of politicians,
it's the opposite.
Vast majority of politicians go in to be millionaires from having nothing.
Right. I don't think that government workers should earn millions of dollars, especially if you're representing.
If you're doing it for the right reasons.
If you're doing it for the right reasons, for me, I only can speak for my experiences. I didn't do it for the medals. I didn't do it for accolades or anything. I did it because it was the right thing to do.
Well, and you talk about that, and your book, I think, shows that pretty vividly, especially in the passage in regards to, and we'll get to it later. I don't want to get into it in depth right now. The way you came up with the presentation of the coffins, once the angels were laid down and the flag and everything else, and it trickled down. But we'll touch base there. I think that shows clearly that you were not looking for glory or anything else, just to get back to your country.
Definitely in it for the right reasons. And
but what I was talking about with you being active or not active but reserve is there's a funny story that in your book. And I giggled my ass off on it because we love Tabasco sauce up in this motherfucker here. And we don't even use Frank's. Sometimes we do, but the Tabasco sauce story.
Right.
What was that, your first tour?
That was my very first tour.
Can you lay it out for those that haven't listened to the or read the book?
Absolutely.
I tried to explain this, and I probably explained it wrong after reading it. Like, of just, the rank, the rank that sat down, and I probably screwed all that up when I was explaining to other people. But Rob and I were laughing our asses off, and then we had a text message conversation about it. So this story.
It was a part of, we were just building the bases over there, so they were bringing in these contract workers. So a lot of these guys were from India or Bangladesh, or I have no idea, but they were cooking our food for us and serving it out. And whatever the dishes were, they were not what they were supposed to be. Right. So it was like,
you mean military food?
Right.
Wasn't
Well, you didn't have professional, cafeteria workers over in the middle of the desert in Kuwait at the time.
Wait a minute, this isn't mac and cheese. Come on.
So, yeah, it's like mac and cheese supposed to have curry in it.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, it was. I don't know, but it was barely edible, and so I knew that if you're going to be deployed, you better bring something to make your food better. And I used to do that whenever we went on 2-week drills and stuff like that, because you never know, you're stuck eating MREs. What makes MREs better, hot sauce. And the little Tabasco sauce bottles, you get tired of that after a while. So when we showed up, I had a big bottle of Frank's Red Hot. And I used to carry it around in my cargo pocket on my side whenever I went to the chow hall. And at this time, usually they would keep like the people separated. The staff officers would eat in certain part of the, but at this juncture, this particular part of building the base, it was sit down wherever you can find a place to sit down and eat. So I get through the line, and me and it was a corporal, and we sat down, and whenever people show up wearing flight suits, they look totally different. They don't belong. Everybody else is wearing sweaty camis and stuff, and we're dirty from throwing sandbags all day. And these guys just show up and looking clean and polished and everything. And they go through the chow hall, and one of the guys spotted me drenching my food with Frank's Red Hot, and I passed it into the corporal next to me, and he put it on, and soon as he put the lid back on, we had one of the officers sat down right in front of us, and I said, "Hey, there, Sergeant, saw that you got a little hot sauce there. Do you mind if I borrow some?" And I was like, reluctantly, "Yeah, sure, but don't let anybody see you, sir." Because at the time we didn't have any hot sauce, so it's like
borderline like prison.
Oh yeah, it's you barely have packets of tea or sugar or anything.
There's only 500 of the guys in the chow hall.
Yeah,
to go to see everything. Yeah.
So he sits down, he puts down, and another officer sits down, and he goes, "Hey, what's that you got there? Hey, mind if I have some?" And he takes it and he puts it all over his food, and he puts it, and the major shows up, and the major sits down in front of me, and he goes, "You don't mind if I?" It's like, "Well, Roger that, sir. Go ahead."
Roger that. God damn it.
And he puts it on, but he doesn't give it back to me. He leaves it further down the table on the table, and I'm like,
you're willing that you're trying to do powder ESP,
use the force loop.
Yeah, Jedi mind tricking it.
So
come back
and
to me.
So this other corporal comes in and he picks it up, and the major goes, "Hey, Corporal, that's our hot sauce." He goes, "Yeah, sir. You mind if I borrow this? You don't see any hot sauce in around here anymore. It's kind of hard to find a place to sit down with all these fucking reservists coming in here." And he's like,
"That's what it was."
Yes. And he's like, "Well, go ahead and tell us what you think about reservists, Corporal." I mean, man, how do the brass can think we can fight and win a war with a bunch of fucking weekend warriors coming over here? And the major goes, "What would you think if I told you if I was a reservist?" Corporal. And you can see this guy's face goes white, and he's like,
made a little mistake there.
He goes, How about you? And another one of the officers is like, yes, sir. I'm a reservist too. How about you? Yes, sir. I'm a reservist too. How about you, Sergeant? Are you a reservist? Yes, sir. I'm a. Give me back the fucking hot sauce, Corporal. Go away.
Yeah. That I guess that's the military equivalent of asking a woman when she's due, when she isn't due, putting your head up your ass at a table.
Yeah, it was funny just to see the shock and horror on this kid's face.
Rob and I hit that same point in the book, and we were laughing about it. And I was like, can you imagine? And this is our quote unquote studio. So when I tell Jill I'm going to the studio, she's like, well, you're going to the bar.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it's a studio.
Bar, same thing.
But
we were just smarter than most other people. We had our studio built in a bar.
But sitting here, it's like, we have we're a little bit proprietary because we're here quite a bit. Give me my hot sauce back.
Yeah. Fuck you. And I just had to throw that little jab in there because, I would watch Generation Kill, and they're making fun of the reservist that was on there. And you get that a lot. There's always a love-hate thing going on with active duty versus reservist. But, I just had to throw that jab in there from a reservist perspective, right back at it.
I think all my buddies that served were all reservists. And I mean, they did multiple tours. And one in particular.
And we run into the same thing in the fire service with volunteers versus career,
right.
Part-time and whatever. It still does take a village to make all of this work. That machine, you're a cog in the machine. And if one of those cogs isn't working, the whole thing doesn't work. Yeah,
it's just a lighthearted jab.
Yeah, but it's fun. But that is
we're all on the same team. We're all in the same fight. But it was a funny story from that people don't really think of. How precious is a bottle of hot sauce when you take it for granted, because you can go to the store. I mean, you go to a Mexican restaurant; it's right there on the table.
Oh yeah.
Hey, I want to do this. I want to do this now.
You're gonna do it. Yeah, I figured it'd be an opportune time.
This is perfect.
Friends of our show, sponsors as well. Engraved in USA are in the house.
Oh, wow.
Jeff, Tanya, and Rich. Rich, you there?
He's right there.
All right. You ready to come up?
Uh-oh.
Come on.
So Engraved in USA takes care of us and our guests, and they got you something special as well. And Rich, where are you?
Yeah.
See, this is why I don't like my back.
If you come in here, you'll get in camera. You're good. You're good.
Pull up a seat. Pull up a seat.
All right.
Now, Christian, don't give up your mic. We want to hear what you have to say.
Well, Chris, from one Marine to another, Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
Thank you for your service and everything you've done. I know we talked before the show. A few things changed. I decided not to be a reservist. So thank you for your weekends.
No hot sauce for you.
No hot sauce for me.
No hot sauce for you. I love that.
While I was in 29 Palms, things are precious. And one of the things that we had as well was my old roommate, Marvin Nash, went a little crazy one day because of he couldn't get any cold water.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that you had the same things over in Iraq. But getting cold water was the same thing, and in 29 Palms, as some people can relate to. And, he went nuts. We'll just leave it at that, and Marvin probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. But with Engraved in USA, for all these guys that they have as their guests, we try and do something special. This is a gift for you from all of us at Engraved in USA, as well as these guys here. Thank you for your service, continued service, and because once a Marine, always a Marine. Semper Fi. Like I said, Jeff and Tanya are here. Tammy and Tim and Jeffrey back at the shop. So thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy this, and we look forward to continue reading the book and hearing the rest of your story.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys, Engraved in USA.
You have to open it now, though.
Yes,
yeah, you do.
I'll open it.
Open up, hold it up to the camera.
Uh-oh.
We hope you like it.
I don't know if the camera will pick it up.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome, man. Thank you.
So,
It's one more.
Take it out of the
out of
the plastic. Because there's a hidden gem on there
Somewhere.
Oh, maybe not. Oh, it didn't show up.
Ah, damn it.
There's my name. Very cool.
All right. So originally, what we were trying to do on that other side
Get you a bottle.
is we were going to put the Frank's Red Hot right there.
That'd have been cool,
But
man.
we weren't able to do it. But that was the premise. But yeah, every
Very
one of our
cool.
guests gets one of those.
Thank you so
They're
much.
awesome mugs, man.
Thank you. I'll be using it this evening.
Yeah,
There you go.
those guys take care of us, and they're great people. But
Thank you, Rich. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff, Tanya. Appreciate you
Tanya,
guys and all
thank
you
you.
guys do for us. Rich,
I'm gonna pull up what we were originally gonna do.
their website, engravedusa.com, is phenomenal. And I think their sponsors
hell
as
yeah.
well helping us out. We're going to have a link so you can get a bunch of stuff from their engravedusa.com
Oh, wow. That'd be
through our
cool.
site as well.
Yeah, I can't wait till we
thank
get
you.
that up and running.
Check out their stuff.
The
'Cause,
merchandise
I mean,
is
they have
fantastic.
got so much stuff. It is
Yeah,
awesome. They can do whatever you want.
very cool. Thank you.
So you said all right. So your dad served
Mhm.
what would you say 3 tours?
3 tours in the Vietnam War.
Okay, and then you became a postman.
Yeah. Mhm.
Go into the reserves.
Mhm.
Tell the story about when you got called up, where they came out on the route.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
remember the guy you
At the
hated?
very beginning.
What was
Yeah.
his name, Chris?
And like I
Yeah,
said,
it was,
we're on your time frame, but
Greg
your
Stort's.
story could go for
Yeah.
4 hours, and I'm fine with it.
So we used to call Greg Stort's the plague of the post office because
You still buddies today?
no, he passed away
Oh,
several years
God,
ago.
no,
He
too
had a stroke and passed away when I was deployed on my 3rd deployment, I believe. But poor guy. He was a good guy, but when you're working as a supervisor, they are the reasons why working for the post office sucks. The supervisors.
Wow.
I mean, if they just leave you alone, let you deliver your mail,
Let me do my job.
just let me do my job, and leave me alone, But
I'm pretty sure we all have
yeah,
either police
supervisors,
chiefs or
yep.
fire chiefs or fire captains or whoever.
Shit, I'm my own asshole, I guess.
Well, he's his own boss. He's his own HR department too.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise
That's
me.
why he
in the
goes through
least.
assistants.
By the way, we
Bigger
closed
shit.
the HR department. We're fine.
I hate myself. I'm such a dick to myself.
So my dad was he was a news hound, especially after 9/11. He knew that I was going to head off to war, and he made a career out of it. And he was the history junkie, watching all the History Channel, Discovery Channel, everything about World War II, Korea, Vietnam, all that stuff, Civil War. And I could say that he was going through quite a bit of anxiety knowing that I was in the only mortuary affairs unit the Marine Corps had. So that's pretty much a guarantee that at some point you're going. And I, at the time, was, all thrilled about it. I'm finally going to be doing something my father did, my grandfather did, going back to the Civil War.
How old were you at that point?
I was 27, maybe.
You're still impervious to any pain
Yeah,
or
yeah,
death
well,
at that
I
point in time.
mean-
Yeah, you're invincible.
I used to box, more, Thai kickbox too. So I was in best shape I ever was in my life. And, I had the boxer's attitude of, you can't hurt me.
Mm.
So,
Sounds like me as a cop at 21, 22, 23.
please.
It's like, I'm not dying.
Rob,
No.
this isn't about you. Okay.
I'm talking
Wait,
about the
wait,
invincibility.
wait,
it's
You've
the Rob
we
show.
We do multiple podcasts a week to talk about you. Just
Well,
please.
welcome
it's
to
the
the One More and I'm Outta Here
invincibility. It's the
podcast.
invincibility aspect of
No,
your 20s
it's
that I
not
was
about you.
bringing out.
That's all I'm saying.
And if you're going to
Please.
talk to me, button that button. I'm not going to a disco with you. Jesus, wear a gold chain if you're going to do that shit. Quit shaving your chest.
It's
by
not
the way.
about me either.
But the invincibility in your 20s.
Right.
Is what I'm saying. That's why you wanted to go where he was apprehensive knowing.
Yeah. And it was kind of like the old warrior sending their first, young his son off to war kind of thing. But I was delivering in the mail and Christmas time, just a couple days before Christmas. And here pulls up Greg Stort's in his car and stuff. And, sticks his head out the window and says, "Hey, Chris, you got a phone call from your Marine unit. They need to talk to you immediately." I took the call, so it sounds pretty serious. And the unit had never called my work looking for me. Usually, if they needed to talk to me, they'd leave a message on my phone or
Like,
with my
"Oh,
wife.
shit, did I steal-
Right, so
Did I steal something?
no, nothing like that. It was so it's something was serious. Because you turn on the news, you got Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. We're gonna go find these people. We had guys in Afghanistan and up in Dayton the summer before 2002. They had the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit come up and stay at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they used to fly the CH-53s around and practice, drop in some guys to go. And they said in newspapers back then they were practicing to go to Baghdad. And when I got that phone call, I was expecting this is where we're going.
Mhm.
So they just said, hey, you need to show up the day after Christmas, and you need to come in and report in, and we'll let you know what's going on from there. But I forgot my phone at home that day, and I worked the route I was carrying that day was right across the main drag from my dad. And I used to eat lunch with him all the time. And so I go and I borrowed his phone. And when I was talking to the unit, you could see that fear materialize on his face. And, from somebody who was, reserved and trying to, as a Brit say, keep that stiff upper lip, to all of a sudden you could see the emotion well up on his face. And my dad he was one of those old school guys that didn't show his emotions. And when I got off the phone with him and I told him what was going on, that I had to show up, that I was getting activated, it was, he gave me one of the longest hugs of his life. And he said, when I was in Vietnam, I remember seeing all of the body bags getting loaded up on the planes. And, when you go over, do whatever you can to not be one of those body bags. And you can, it was a lot of emotion in that.
And gave me chills right there.
Yeah. I remember I called him afterwards and I was like, I just hit that point, and I was like, that actually got me kind of emotional. Just the long hug in the snow and shit like that. And knowing he knew what you were going to see.
Yeah. And and it was, after the hug, he gave me a handshake that was not like a friendly handshake, but it was, I'm proud of you, but I'm terrified for you, kind of a handshake, but as a professional warrior to, a son about to go. And the funny thing is I looked over at Greg, who was known as the asshole, the plague of the post office, and he was holding back tears. And he was emotional at that time too. And
did Greg get better with you afterwards?
I spent literally 3 years away. I come back and I work for just a few months, and then I put my hand up and said, I'm going. So I really didn't have a whole lot of time with Greg, because when you settle in after deployment, you're just surprised that you're home, and you're just people that you delivered mail to, because when you get deployed, everybody knows you're gone. Whatever happened to that young guy? That young guy that delivered a mail. Oh, he got deployed. He's over in Iraq. Oh, wow. So when you show up, everybody wants to talk to you.
Yeah.
Right.
And having read that story, though, I think a lot of credit goes to Greg for because he was back at the post, took that call or some call. He knew about it. And didn't wait. He could have waited till you were done with your deliveries.
Yeah.
He could have waited till you came back in and said, hey, you got a message.
Everybody.
But he went out and found you on your route that day, said, hey, and he knew, for whatever reason, he knew that was an important call. And I think a lot of credit goes to him for you being able to tell that story.
Everybody, I was there when 9/11 happened. And
at the post office?
At the post office. And, and as time progressed on, you get a phone call, and my wife called me, and first time it was a plane crashed into the World Trade Center. Oh, what a horrible accident. I better get off the phone, because if they catch me on the phone, I'm going to get in trouble. Right. So, and then another phone call, just a little bit later, she's like, hey, another plane. And I was like, oh. Yeah, this isn't an accident.
This wasn't an accident.
Hey, kids, by the way, at this point in the program, we're aging ourselves. We did not have texts, IM, DMs, or any of that other shit to deal with. You had to actually answer the fucking phone call.
Did you finish delivering mail that day?
From the day that the Greg came and got me?
No, the day the planes hit the towers.
I can't remember if I did or not. I don't think any of us did, to tell you the truth, looking back, because I remembered.
I mean, how could you? I mean,
another carrier, he was in the Air Force Reserves, and me and him were good friends, Mike Golden, and he lived in that area. So he goes, meet me at my house for lunch at this time. And we went up there, and we were probably, and your lunch is probably a half hour, at best, when you're working for the post office. I think we sat there for 2 hours and watched. I remembered.
I think a lot of people
did you both know at that time you were going to go?
I also think that was the day the earth stood still.
Were you feeling
it was a day or two
way?
afterwards?
It definitely was the day
my mail up.
It was the day the mail stopped.
Maybe it was the same day when the 9/11 happened. And we had another guy, Steve Gillum. He retired out of the Air Force, and he was telling the assistant postmaster, and he goes, I might get a phone call. I might have to go back to active duty and stuff. And he comes right over to where I'm casing my mail. I'm putting my mail up, and he goes, I'm not worried about you going. I'm worried. He pointed at me. He goes, I'm worried about him going. And then at that moment, I realized I'm the only Marine here. I'm the only mortuary affairs guy, one of the 33, 37 guys in the entire Marine Corps.
Which is amazing.
Is amazing.
It's amazing to me.
And it was just an afterthought of me, during the 90s when I joined the unit, like, well, I got a beater car anyway, 87 Ford Tempo, and I barely can make it to the Columbus if I joined the Columbus unit. So I'll just stay here, So
what's the reason that the Marine Corps keeps that unit to the numbers that they do? It seems like there would be more guys doing that.
Peacetime? Peacetime, it was, well, to back the story up, the reason why we existed, because before there was no need for the Marine, unless it's like World War II or Korea, some big gigantic conflict, right, where we had to inter remains on the battlefield. So if you go to Normandy, there's this gigantic, huge, graveyard that from the Army guys, the Graves Registration, that's what they did. They were known as Graves Registration back all the way up through Vietnam. And in fact, all the way up through when I joined the unit, we were known as Graves Registration. But since we take remains and put them on planes and send them back, there's no need of the quote unquote Graves Registration. That's why we were named Mortuary Affairs later on. But I'm kind of lost myself in my thoughts. Let
me because I'm thinking back to the time when I was in the service and the different bases I was at. It didn't even occur to me that there were people that were handling that sort of thing.
Right.
Because the people get killed in training accidents, natural causes, whatever. So I'm guessing at stateside bases and even overseas, that sort of thing gets contracted out. Right. With local mortuary people. Is that normally the case at most of the bases?
For most of the bases, for bigger forces like the Army, Air Force, and Navy, they have a mortuary affairs component.
Yeah.
But for the Marine Corps, we don't, because it's a small force. It's like peacetime is like 175,000. Right. So there's no need for unless you're in active combat, there's no need for a mortuary affair. So going back until the Gulf War, there was no mortuary affairs for the Marine Corps. What had happened was there was a case in Vietnam, and this goes out to Lieutenant Colonel Cassidy, because he asked me to speak about this whenever I can get an opportunity about. There was a Marine who was with 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines in Vietnam, and his name is now it would be like Gunnery Sergeant Jackson, but it was a PFC Jackson from Atlanta, Georgia, in Vietnam, and he was in a base, small fire base, and it was an accident where he was with the artillery rounds and with their powder bags, and over where they keep their extra powder bags before they burn them up after they send a fire mission out. And I guess he was standing there when the thing blew up. And so some people say that he was on the helicopter that medevaced out. He was still alive. But long story short, he's missing in action. even though that they said that he showed up at a hospital. So there's is either he's still out on that hill in the middle of the jungle, and people were so hurt on that helicopter, and they mistook another person for him, or he died in the hospital and they mislabeled him, and he came back to the United States as another person, and so somebody else. So there's a mix up in there, or there is even a talk of a Black Ops first sergeant or sergeant major of Army guy showed up and said, I am missing 10 guys. I'm pointing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 is being him. I'm taking them to fill up my roster that I need. So, and so the government was saying that we should keep it quiet because raising a lot of eyebrows, because you got to dig up all the people that you think. Then you're talking about Black Ops stuff. Then you're talking about, so he said, this will never happen again for the Marine Corps.
Whoops. My bad.
So this will never happen again for the Marine Corps. We are going to stand up a small experimental unit, and we'll keep just one platoon strong. And in case we ever need these guys, we can retain that knowledge of how to go out and perform this mission. So all through, they did the Gulf War. They cleaned up the highway of death in northern Kuwait, and they came back, and we were working off of World War II manuals training. We didn't know how to train until the Gulf War. Not the Gulf War, but until Iraq.
How can you have manuals from World War II?
Because nobody inputted the knowledge that they learned from Vietnam to, Gulf War, to Beirut, to Kosovo. Nobody updated any of the manuals.
There was no one in charge of looking at that.
No.
over that.
No, that's like military wide.
Like a 40-year period of time.
That's the intriguing part.
That doesn't get updated. That's unbelievable.
We still had diagrams of like bombers, crashed where, when you have a bomber in World War II, you have the wings that might come off, and then you have a fuselage that's broken, that kind of stuff. But, now
you're dealing with fighter jets.
Now you're fighting the fighter jets that crashes in the mountains. And when you have a whole fighter jet reduced down to like a couple feet, what can happen to the remains and those kind of things.
Right.
So people weren't updating the thing. People serve their entire careers, and they just keep on, going over and over and over the same thing. And at the time in the 90s, nobody was cross training between the different agencies like the FEMA, and it was whatever FEMA knew. Whatever the FBI knew, the FBI. So we weren't sharing knowledge.
Close. It was all held close.
And
you picked up some shit from somebody. Who was it? Was it FEMA or
it was
NHTSA?
The National shoot. I always want to see National Tire and Battery. National Transportation.
Hey, we have our own sponsors on the show, by the way.
Okay, sorry.
NTSB.
You didn't clear that with us ahead of time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I remember you.
It's all the acronyms. It's all the letters. It's hard.
Right. And so what it was.
What was it? It was the blood or something along those lines.
It was a Black Hawk helicopter. And I remember it was that night, and we were down to back everybody up into the story.
Is this one of the pictures you sent me?
Yeah, I believe so. So we were cleaning up the helo was on.
Was it your first tour?
Yeah, that's it right there.
Yep. See, I told you. As you say it,
we had to wear Tyvek suits because the helicopter blades are made out of a microfiber, and it's carcinogenous. Basically, it'll give you cancer.
Yeah.
So we had to wear respirators and all that kind of stuff.
Well, when you're at 29 Palms, I think Frank's Red Hot has to be labeled to cause cancer. Everything's a carcinogen out there.
I just think that
everything in California,
anything marine based. I mean, like it's in the water, Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
So
or Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, I wasn't even in the Marine Corps, but I feel like I should call that number just in case.
Yeah.
I might get 37 cents.
Call before you
from that lawsuit.
But yeah, we ended up. I remember that night because we ended up losing some tents. It was we had a sandstorm that showed up, and out in the desert, he just show up out of nowhere, and we had a few tents that they look kind of like small circus tents. And once you have enough wind, they'll just fly in the wind. And then you have everybody's gear blowing out in the middle of this desert, and it's pitch black, and you got concertina wire everywhere. And concertina wire, if people don't know, is razor wire. And so there's blowing out there. Well, these guys, this particular unit, it's an Army.
Most of the group in here knows what it is.
Okay.
They've been around prisons and jails.
That or Dan puts it around his house to keep Rob away.
So they were out practicing touch and goes in the middle of the night. And their thing is when they have a brownout, what a brownout is when they go down and they kick up all the sand, and the sand's going around them. And they have a preset order saying if one you can't see, one will break left and one will break right. And this guy here was the guy who was supposed to break right. And what had happened was a big gust of wind came down, and it drove his blades into the ground. You could see these huge chop marks in the ground as we were walking up to the scene. And once the helicopter engine will catch it, and it will auto rotate the entire helicopter, and it will just roll over in a big crash, fireball, and all that stuff. And we heard about it from Mortuary Affairs saying, hey, you might get called up to go out here to help with this. Oh, the NTSB guys are taking care of it, because the NTSB guys, since it wasn't officially a war yet,
Right.
They have total control of the total jurisdiction, because this is considered a peacetime accident, which was a huge godsend to us. No disrespect to those who lost their lives, but it was knowledge that we had never were taught.
Mm-hmm.
This is our first time we've actually got to get our hands on a scene that they needed us.
What's that cliche? So, you don't know what you don't know,
right?
Until you know
until you know it. So our job was to be their hands, and they would direct us what to do. They did the investigation. When we showed up, they already had the flags already placed down. Flags, the red parts are going to be remain portions. Yellow is personal effects. So whenever you show up, we would grid everything off, and there was like, all right, from here you would just start digging down, and we would categorize, we'll map everything, and then we would do the recovery. They had, at that point when we showed up, they had already recovered the large portions of the remains and put them onto Camp New Jersey, which the base what these guys were from. So we were there to clean up all the tiny bits and pieces of the guys.
That piece in the back, is that the tail?
That's the tail.
Yeah, it's a tail. That's what I thought.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, though, you guys, I believe you came with hammers or something, and he told you what, a screwdriver in regards to blood that had
we were
been
using
liquefied in fire.
Probably e-tools. I mean, because there's nothing to really hit with a hammer. So we're probably just using, they're like, hey, bring your K-bars. K-bars.
Maybe I'm thinking of Bradley.
And right. And you're using, and he's like, hey, this is the best way that you can determine what's what, because you have this helicopter. It's all twisted, burned, melted. You got pieces of like computer board and just chunks that are all burned up and missing. And it's just chaotic. And you have pieces where you can't tell if what is human remains and what is a piece of foam.
Right.
Because they all look the same. Right. They're all burned.
Especially when it coagulates.
So, right. And so what he said was, this is how you tell. You get this screwdriver and you tap it, and they'll all have the feeling. If it's metal, it'll feel like, metal,
Tink.
Right. Then if you have a piece of insulating foam, it'll feel fake. You'll feel that just like you put in a toothpick in a styrofoam, right? But if it's human, if it's remains, it'll have this totally different crunch to it. It'll have this totally different feel to it. Wow. And it was something that was never in any of the literature. It was never in nobody had ever taught us for us in the 90s, it was, if we go to war, we're not taking any casualties. It's going to be quick over, just like it was in the Gulf War. We have all this technology, but nobody ever thought we're going to get in a prolonged conflict where you're going to have multiple, vehicles getting blown up, helicopter shot down, all that kind of stuff.
It's a whole different atmosphere.
Totally different.
It would if you be in a quote unquote sterile atmosphere, controlled atmosphere, you're out in the middle of the fucking desert,
right?
In Tyvek suits,
yep,
sweating your balls off, I'm sure, or freezing your balls off, depending,
right? And
then you're having to diagram this whole site. So, like, I'm a arson investigator, and it's the same thing. You're excavating, all this stuff, but
it's
then
an archaeological dig.
But you're trying to figure out, oh, that might be a piece.
Yep.
And to make sure you get all of those pieces.
And there's
like what pressure that has to be.
For us, it wasn't our investigation. We were there to absorb as much knowledge from that particular case.
And I'm in my head jumping a little forward to the Bradley issue,
to the Bradleys. In my third deployment, we had multiple Bradleys getting taken out. We had, Humvees, and so
you corrected me. I won't call it a tank ever again. You corrected me in the
I was corrected by a tanker, so I didn't know. We even on the scene, even in my reports, my after action reports, I called it a tank because I don't know. I'm a Marine, I've never seen a Marine Corps tank. I'm a reservist. I'm in a military police company. We work out of Humvees, so, but as much as we learned on the scene. In another instance, I had no idea. Every time we cleaned this little grid out, we kept on running into this looked like burnt sugar in the ground. We had no idea what it was. I'm chipping away at it and I'm pulling little bits of bone and all the stuff out of there and stuff. And I had no idea. And I was like, damn, man, this stuff is everywhere. And he goes, what is this stuff? Is it like hydraulic fluid or what? He goes, and one of the guys is like, no, that's blood. That's just got cooked.
Yeah.
Because all the fire that was everywhere, and you'll have these big spots. So you run these big spots or these pools of burned sugar or whatever is, and he goes, that's where a bigger portion of remains was sitting. And you just have to dig through it, chip at it, and try to pull out the remains.
Now, when you guys pulled out the remains, did you have DNA testing on site?
No, we don't do that stuff. We are more like evidence collectors.
Right.
It is somebody else's job to.
But
these guys get paid a lot more.
But the shit you're pulling out,
right,
is going to be sent for DNA testing.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. All that stuff gets sent to Dover Air Force Base in Delaware.
Okay.
And those guys will do all the DNA testing, and they'll do like dental stuff, embalming. They do all of the professional. I was just an E5 sergeant.
Right.
That's way out of my league.
But you do talk about in the book in regards to grabbing as much of a sample as you can of a remain, and I assume it's for the purposes of matching it up to positively identify this soldier as this person.
We're not experts in DNA. We're more tactical experts whose job is to recover as much as humanly possible.
Do they give you limits or parameters that, if we need bones or we need marrow or something?
No, they tell us what is better to get remains out of, like, depending on the conditions. You want to collect everything.
Right.
For me, when it got down to my third deployment, when I was the guy in charge, making all the decisions of everything on a particular scene, I felt it was a total disservice and disrespect to leave anything belonging to that remains in a country that hates them.
Cheers to that.
So I would recover blood. I would cover every single thing because I thought that maybe, and this is years before I ever thought about, writing and anything. And I barely can even write a sentence back then, before I taught myself how to write. But I ever thought that if the story ever made it to a family member of somebody that we had recovered, that they would like to know that we got everything out. that I did not want to leave anything behind in a place that didn't want them there.
Yeah, I mean, it harkens back to Somalia, and,
Right,
Black Hawk
exactly.
Down
And
days
I
where they're
remember
dragging the
Somalia.
pilots through.
I remember Somalia,
Yeah.
and that was one of the reasons why we trained so hard, because we never wanted another incident where people are, are hanging guys. Like I was there. Actually, I got blown up when they started hanging those guys from the bridge.
Yep.
I was there through that bridge, that area, to get out to Haditha, the place where I got blown up.
Yep. I couldn't remember where it was that you did, but let me real quick before we go there.
Haditha was a dam, correct?
Yeah, it was a dam.
Yeah.
Let me
Just trying to make sure that
I do want
my
to get to
stupid
there real
fireman
quick, because I also want to get
comprehension.
to the Bradley and I want to
Yep,
get to
yep,
the flag.
Yep.
But on and you may know this, you may not, but the coagulated blood, the blood that is burned and from the intense heat of these machines and the airplane fuel and everything else. Are you able to extract, if DNA from that, even if it's
I don't
burnt,
know about
or
blood
does it
or
burn
not.
it out of the DNA?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have never been through a DNA class. To us, it was something with the people with white lab coats.
Mhm.
That's their realm. My job was to collect as everything as humanly possible.
I'll try to make a phone call, see if I can't get that answer.
we have a comment in the chat. Marine's blood is the handle. Good job. That's a great attitude. And thank you. So
Thank you. One of the things I've read about working in that theater is how difficult the conditions are. When you talk about the sand that blows all the time,
It's always
and
blowing.
it gets so fine, it gets into everything, and it ruins jet engines. It ruins all kinds of machinery. How much of a factor was that for you, trying to work in that environment and having all that to deal with on top of the other
really
stuff you had
wasn't
to
really
do?
a factor, because you have
Really?
to get used to it.
Yeah.
It's just the conditions that sucks. It's more of, you don't have time to think about when you're on the scene doing a recovery, or if you're on a patrol somewhere, you're doing any kind of op. It's just the conditions you're working in.
you're mission oriented.
You were doing the job the NTSB was doing, but you were
Right.
getting rounds fired at your ass
Right.
while you were doing it.
Whenever I did my jobs, I was lucky that we didn't have any rounds shot at us the times that I was doing. We had one recovery where we had an IED blow up on a tail end of our perimeter, but nobody was hurt from that. Now there was another team when we invaded Iraq. My platoon at the time, I think we got down to 33 troops. We had to pick up some more guys that volunteered to help us out. We got separated into 3 teams, and one of the teams ended up going into Nazaria, where the Marines got pinned down. In Nazaria, that's where they took they had a track vehicle that was leaving, and an A-10. Their blinker was off, and they didn't have their flag their air panel on, so they was carrying a bunch of wounded guys out. And the A-10 thought it was a bad guy, and so went and it took him out. But my other team that was there had to handle a downed Cobra. Hit some guide wires to a water tower, and it tumbled down and crumbled. And when they showed up, they started receiving fire. They pulled out the remains were still on fire. It melted through. One of them remains melted through 3 bags before they were able to get them cool enough to get them out. But they were getting active, engaged at that time.
That's unbelievable.
But the prospect, I mean, it's not
but
like
the
the
prospect.
NTSB guys that, we're going to do this and then we're going to go back to the hotel.
But active, as far as active, by my 3rd tour, you really didn't see a whole lot of active shooting, especially when we had a bunch of other in a wagon wheel. You got 50 cows, Bradley sitting there with their 20 mics and, Bushmaster guns. And, you got maybe 100 guys on scene.
What'd you call the one? The maw, the big gun. I can't remember what maw something.
Oh, the 50 cal, the Ma Deuce.
The Ma Deuce.
Yeah. We had all these guns, and so they don't want to get in the
non-military guy. You can tell that.
You don't want to get into an active gunfight with we had thermal sights in our stuff, so you don't want to get active. So what was the bigger threat was IEDs.
Yeah.
They don't know where when you show up to a scene, they had this thing where they go up and blow up some troops. They know that we're going to go out there and recover those guys. They bring in more guys, and then they'll try to blow more of us up as there to create more casualties as possible. And when we're doing that kind of stuff, that's when you start seeing more of the where they start turning the IEDs into instead of just straight artillery rounds, they're putting acetylene tanks in there. They're putting jelly gasoline. So their thing is to catch people on fire, create more havoc, create more chaos, and to make people terrified to go out there and do these missions. Right?
Was it your first tour that you were injured with the IED, or
no? It was my second
tour. I couldn't remember. And you took a hell of a hit. I never did figure out in the book. Did you have your weapon with you?
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't, when you were trying to get your ass up the hill, I couldn't tell if
I
you had
ended
your
up
weapon or
finding
not.
my weapon. What had happened was we had just got there. I think we were there for maybe 2 weeks, and we were trying to take over for the Army. It was the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment for the Army that was in that area. And they would go in, they would drive in with their Bradleys and their vehicles and stuff. I was with 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines Weapons Company. And so at the time, Lieutenant Colonel McCoy was 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. They told us in a welcome aboard speech that they strive to be the hardest battalion in the Marine Corps. And they lived up to that. And so they were like, we're not going to go in there and we're not going to patrol on with vehicles. We're going there on foot. And if we get in a fight, we're kicking down doors and taking names. And they lived up to that word. So it was one of the mornings that we were making contact with the police, their police station. The police station they've been attacked multiple times by, groups of like 100, 200 bad guys lighting up the place. So it's kind of like the Alamo, you're surrounded by bad guys getting lit up. And so we're supposed to make contact with these guys and teach them Western ideas of community policing. And if you don't know anything about how their police, how they operate in Iraq, is that they are there not so much to enforce the rules. They're there to take bribes for the government. They sit around and drink tea a lot. And so we had to enforce to them that, hey, you have to have an active role, an active presence. You got to gain the trust of your local populace you're trying to protect. And a lot of these guys who had relatives that were bad guys.
But see, to my way of thinking, that's just another part of.
Brought to you by Dan Carroll.
He pays a tab every time he says
of the
to my
impossible.
way of thinking.
We've yet to see the tab.
He's never paid it.
I mean, your mission was already hard enough, but
Right.
but that kind of this nation building kind of stuff that
Right.
you're talking about,
It's a total different ballgame.
and it's a totally different culture,
Mm-hmm.
and to go in there and say, well, we can instill all these Western ideas into this culture. It doesn't work.
Right.
And I don't know why it has taken so long to get that message through their heads that we're better off just staying out of that part of it and paying bags and bags of money to these guys, trying to think that things are going to change.
You can't change 5,000 years of culture.
Yeah.
These people, that's in
5,000 years of war too.
Right.
Well, it's
They
corrupt.
just
I mean,
fight to fight.
It's
I've always said
thoroughly corrupt from one end to the other.
right.
I've always said if they stop fighting, that's when we need to be worried because they've been fighting their whole existence.
So when they start making raps.
And that's the difference between us and so many different nations around the world is that here we're a melting pot. We come from so many different backgrounds from all over the world and so many different cultures. And we embrace those different cultures, whether it's, St. Patrick's Day with the Irish or, Italian food or
The day everybody's Irish.
Indian food.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so, you have these people where you appreciate their lineage, their culture, the background and stuff, where everybody else in the world, no, they've been fighting the same people going back to thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And they are brought up to hate the other person that lives on the other street from them.
Hate thy neighbor.
Right. And that's the thing. People don't realize that we're like the only country in the world that's ever had a civil rights movement. You know,
Yeah.
you go to Africa, they'll chop people up with machetes.
It's happening today. It's happening as we speak. Yeah.
I had a friend. I met a guy over at the VA when I was going through therapy over there, and he was at the embassy. I want to say, I can't remember where it was, Somalia, or he was at some embassy. I believe it was Somalia. And they had to have a UN truck show up, and they dump food off the back of a UN truck. And you start seeing women and children go over there and start pulling the food from there. And then you saw these people with gun trucks show up and with machetes, and they'd hack them.
Sure.
Right there in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
And then they can't engage because of the international, and they're there to protect the embassy, not the people. And and it's just a realization of we live in a horrible world that people in the United States don't know how good they have it here.
But yet we
Amen
want
to that, brother.
But we want to sit here and then pick each other apart
and bitch and moan and try to divide and stuff. I think we have more things in common with people from different political views, different, than people want to admit.
We got to get rid of some of the keyboards.
I want to make a little bit of light, just a little bit of light of when you were in the hospital after your IED attack.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy, did you read the book? So the description that he gave of his nurse.
Oh my God. Yeah. I was like, shit, is he still married?
The description he gave of his nurse of how tight her scrub top was, what she smelled like. I was like, this is a man after my own heart.
God bless America.
When you're forward, you're so far forward. Okay. When I say forward, you are so far out in the sticks, out in bad guy land. You're totally outnumbered. We're living in a place that had no water, so we couldn't take showers. Okay, we take baby wipe showers.
Yeah.
So it's basically
nice.
Sometimes,
as Rob calls it, a Rob bath.
Yeah, it's a whore bath.
So you stand out on our little balcony and you just wipe yourself down, and there you go. I'll put some deodorant on, and you're good to go.
That's a whore bath.
All right. So everybody that was got the contract to bring water out to us to our porta showers that we had like a little porta, like at the bottom of the dam. Everybody that had the contract ended up missing, or they were found and executed by the bad guys. So we had no water. We barely had food. So
this to say you stunk.
Well, yeah, we stunk. And so when you're in those austere conditions, your primal senses take over, right? Because you're just used to smelling foul, Under Armour, armpits, and all that stuff. So, and your primal senses take over, and you become much more sensitive. So all of a sudden, when I got blown up,
I love how she's sitting here and he's laying this story down.
Just let him finish. Let him finish that story
to help him,
because I'm watching her as she's talking.
I got blown up, and all of a sudden, I'm thrust from one world to another world, where all of a sudden it's fluorescent lights and hallways and sterile conditions, and you're smelling people's shampoo. You can smell it from across the room. People who live in civilization, that's just normal.
Yeah.
But for somebody who is living on the line, it's intense.
Yeah, it changes.
And being in those austere conditions, we weren't around women. So to all of a sudden being thrust into that situation, like, oh, that t-shirt's way too tight. Like, wow.
Good for you.
And here's another thing. And I know my wife's sitting right there.
But you're a man as well.
And the funny thing is, they
human.
wheeled me into the emergency room, right? And I see this other guy, he's Marine Corps tattoos, buck naked, hands across his private, sitting there, and he's just weaving back and forth because they had him on some good meds, right? And I was like, man, that guy is feeling good, right? And I hate to be that guy in that situation because he got these pretty nurses working on him. and he's got his hands over,
Schwant's all hanging out.
right. And I was good to go until they told me to strip my clothes off, and I was like, "Wait a minute."
Roles have changed. Roles have
I was
changed.
like, I don't want to show my twig and berries here in front of the pretty nurses.
Nah,
You think about fluffing?
Oh
they got to
man,
be used to that.
I was
man.
like, I was thinking, please don't get an erection, please.
But come out a little bit.
I was like, that girl, her boobs are about to pop out, or I was like, oh my god.
And I called.
I mean, it's much better than looking at the guy that you were bucking
Yes.
next to.
And the funny thing was, and I'm trying not to look at her, right? And I'm
Oh.
trying not to look at her, and she kept on looking at me, and she's irrigating my leg. I had a big chunk of my calf blown off, and still had like dirt and everything in it, and she's irrigating my leg, and she goes, "Hey, Marine, I know exactly what you're looking at, and I don't mind." And I blush and I look away. And at that moment, she ripped something out of my leg, and I was like, "Oh shit!" You know? And I look back and I think about it, and I laugh, and I think it's so pathetic that how it was. But I think it's part of that medicine that they used.
God bless the nurses, man.
I knew you said you were bringing your wife with you, and
Yeah,
I had to
yeah.
ask the question because as I'm reading it, I'm sitting there and I was
Yeah,
like,
Dexter asked me the same thing on I Am Pitt's podcast.
It's on page 223, and I'm going to read a little bit of the prose. But I had to flip to the cover to make sure Fabio wasn't on the cover of this fucking book. I thought I picked up the wrong book when I read this. It's been a long time since you have been around girls, huh? She said to me, cracking a smile and looking at me coyly. She was a black-haired beauty of Hispanic descent with proud and noble features and olive skin. She possessed an intoxicating fragrance of medical soap and women's shampoo, which seemed so foreign to my olfactory senses.
"There's no fucking way you wrote that."
I did.
I'm just kidding. That shit my mom used to
Skipping
read.
it, but she wore a U.S. Army T-shirt that looked a size too small, and it pronounced the ampleness of her breasts, which I could not ignore. She caught me gawking, red-handed, so she said, "I see you looking over there, Marine. I know what you're looking at, and I don't mind." Holy shit! I want to meet this chick.
God bless her. God bless
You
her.
know, the funny thing is, I did a podcast with I Am Pitts, Dexter. He's a good guy.
Dexter's great.
And he swears up and down that he had the same nurse.
Well, I reached
I
out.
remember hearing that.
I reached out
Yep.
to Brad Winstrip, Congressman Winstrip's office. He couldn't be here today, but
We've had him on as a guest.
we've had him on as
Cool,
guest, but
cool.
we wanted to try to get him here because you talk so highly of the medical staff and how
Mhm.
professional they are. And I can't remember. Was Brad? Is he a reservist?
He is a reservist.
Oh,
yeah.
damn!
As
Look
a
at
ma-
that.
as a matter
Look
of
at
fact.
that.
Weird.
Yeah, it's crazy. But Brad is Congressman Winstrip is a great guy. I've known him for years, and he was on the show and just a phenomenal guy that put country first too.
Yeah.
In it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I want to hit two more stories.
I want to find that girl.
The Bradley part I think is just absolutely
Yes.
amazing.
And then the flag.
There's two Bradleys.
So where you had to go back out.
You talking about the where he had to break it the vehicle
Yes.
part?
Yeah,
where
Yes.
it was,
3-day
yes.
long with
I think
sledgehammers.
that is very apropos.
Yeah.
And then we'll end with the flag
Okay.
and
Yes.
how all that works.
Can we at least hit the major with the
Absolutely.
I had to suck a dick, and it was a big
Oh,
dick
God.
story.
Yes.
Jesus Christ. Who
The
hasn't said
international
that? That's
story.
the first thing you heard? You thought that was odd?
That was the international.
We have
story.
said that many a time to each other. God, I had to go fucking eat a dick in front of this judge today.
Yep.
Well, like I said in the book, you're trying to tell 18 to 20-year-olds, 18, 23-year-olds,
That you ate a dick, and it was a
that
big
that
dick.
you had to suck a dick today, and it was a big dick.
I mean,
Then it was the general's dick.
it was visual.
And
I
they
knew
were
it.
like, what?
Say what?
What is he talking
Thought
about?
I was in the Marine Corps. God damn it.
So
I
the
was in the
Bradley,
Navy.
he had semen.
Oh, hey, Seaman.
That goes out to David J. Who's in
Sorry
the
to
chats.
my naval friends.
So the Bradley, though, you guys spent 3 days on scene. That was your
yeah.
third and final tour,
That was on my third tour.
and it was God. I can't remember. It was an IED that exploded the ammunition
Yeah.
inside the Humvee.
If I remember
which-
right, it was 6 155 artillery shells and 2 acetylene tanks.
Yeah, inside the Bradley.
It was underneath the Bradley.
Fuck.
So the thing about IEDs and flat bottom vehicles is that
You said flat bottom, right?
Flat bottom.
Not fat bottom,
No,
not
flat,
queen.
flat,
Okay,
like
flat.
flat as a tabletop. Is that all the energy will come up and punch a hole through that flat bottom. Now you have vehicles that has V bottoms where all that energy is
Dispersed.
throughout the sides. So the survival rate inside of a V bottom vehicle, like a Buffalo or a Cougar or whatever they call those things, those were coming in when I was getting out. But like Humvees, Bradleys, they absorb all that energy that's exploding. And so once that bottom part is breached and you get to all the internal ammunition, then it's just boom from
Game
there.
over.
It's game over.
Yeah.
It just starts.
Have you ever thrown a can of baked beans in a fire?
No, never.
I would equate that to that. I would the
Jesus
visual I'm
Christ,
seeing.
that's what you're equating.
well,
it to.
the heat.
It's a fucking IED.
blows up
Right.
because
Well,
once
it's-
it breaches that, it gets in there, the pressure, and it blows everything up.
Right.
It's weird to me that wasn't
Your analogies,
incorporated
I love
in
them.
the in the original design.
Came
of
to
those
me real
vehicles.
quick, and I'm
Well-
in the mood for baked beans.
They were designed back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be designed on like fighting in the European theater. Where minefields aren't it's mobility is what they're looking for. And even though that after all these years, they keep on upgrading the armor, they're starting to put more armor, like reactive armor on there. So they're good for like an RPG being shot, rocket propelled grenade being shot at it. And so it'll have that explosive blow up when it's hit. So it'll negate the shape charge that's shooting at them. But they're underneath the carriage is not protected. It's just aluminum magnesium composite. So when it catches on fire, it melts.
Yep.
And it's relatively thin. They're based upon a quick reaction. Basically, a war kicks off in Europe. That's what they were designed for. They put them on a plane and they fly them over there. And they can have one more gun with, you can have troops in the back. But over in an area where ambushes are prevalent and they have IEDs everywhere, yeah, that's just a bad.
It's amazing, though. I mean, but don't mean to cut, but how the IED experience in Iraq, Afghanistan has taught people going forward, the federal government as well, for cross training the individuals, for the ATF, et cetera, for like the Olympic Park bombing and the other shit.
Right.
And how they modify.
Yeah, how they've learned the
modify.
triggers and everything else that goes along with it.
The funny thing, I don't want to say the funny thing, but I remember when we invaded Iraq, we had a class from EOD guys, and they were saying, you got to watch out for IEDs. And I'm a freaking reservist, dude. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
Is that like my high school program?
Like a high school sex ed thing?
No, like IEP.
What is that?
Dan
right?
had an IEP before there were IEPs back in high school.
So he had they were like IEDs. They're kind of like homemade bombs. I'm like, so kind of like a hand grenade in a can and a string. You pull the string and kaboom. You're like, yeah, something like that. So I'm like, oh, watch out for cans.
Look out for black cats.
Yeah. Watch out.
If you see somebody with a sign that says "just buried," don't get near the car.
We didn't see any IEDs during the invasion. Most of this stuff was, well, at least where I was at. I was, for the initial invasion going up to like April sometime.
What was the main highway called? Shit, out of Kuwait.
I can't remember what it is on the south.
It didn't.
Tampa.
IEDs didn't happen until it got bogged down, and you had
But
pockets of
2004,
resistance and Al Qaeda coming up.
I talk about it on my second tour, how it was nothing in 2003. 2004, we were calling them convoy killers because they would have where you would have like 100 yards where they would stagger down the highway. So with one hit, they'd just blow all those 100 yards up. And they would kill, many vehicles, and they would start shooting at that time. So, and when I remember going up in our vehicles, because we had to drive from Udari Range all the way out to Haditha, and so you saw all those IED marks as we're going, and it looked like the surface of the moon in some places because there was these craters everywhere. And you fast forward to 2005 and 6, where they were no longer doing the convoy kill, so easy to spot. Now they were taking all of those rounds and putting them in one pile, and then they start putting jelly gasoline and all that stuff, and then their idea was to start taking out
napalm, baby.
Right, they start taking out as big vehicles. Now I've heard some guys talk about it, and I've never seen it, but they were even putting artillery rounds up in the palm trees, like grid them off 100 yards by 100 yards, and they start shooting at helicopters and trying to get them low, and they'll blow them all up.
Fuck.
And try to drop the. I've never seen it.
Does that work?
Just I don't know. I just remember guys talking about
strategic as fuck.
I have not heard of that part.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, these people are ingenious. When you have nothing to do, but they got this dire hatred for Americans who are in your country, and you're being fueled. All these people being pumped in from all over the world as jihadist fighters from all over the world, Chechen snipers, and all these people coming in to do battle. They have all this time on their hands, and artillery rounds are so easy. So easy to get in Iraq. They're everywhere. Saddam Hussein had cash piles everywhere in Iraq. I remember flying over a set, and I still had artillery pieces in the middle of the desert,
really
dug in and everything. Piles of artillery rounds sitting next to their and there was so much stuff the EOD could not get to them all.
Yeah, but they were at war all the time, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there was an 11-year war before September 11th happened.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, you had the Gulf War, and as many times as he had Saddam Hussein had the uprising up in the Shia uprising in the south. That's why he ended up diverting the Tigris and Euphrates rivers away from the Shia homeland. So when we invaded Iraq, it was supposed to be a real lush marshlands. They were known as the Marsh Arabs. It was all a desert down there. I mean, it was just gray dust. And at the very beginning, I talk about all these people that were making their way to the highway to welcome us in. And you didn't see a donkey, you didn't see a motorcycle, you didn't see vehicles, you didn't see a house as far as the eye could see from horizon to horizon. But yet these people were there barefoot. I got some pictures of them. They're barefoot to welcome us in. And I remember seeing this little girl. She was wearing a little pink dress, and they stood out. I mean, it's like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. You know, it's so surreal. She's wearing this little girl, 2-3 years old, wearing this pink dress with white ruffled lace and white patent leather shoes. And her dad was crouched down behind her, had a finger in her mouth, and she was waving at us. And I realized at that time that they dressed their daughter in the best clothes that she had to welcome the Americans in, because at that time, they had nothing. Saddam Hussein was trying to divert. He did divert the Tigris Euphrates rivers from, and their culture was dying out. And we were their last hope of keeping their culture alive.
That's absolutely amazing.
And you know, now years removed, people are like, "Oh, I can't believe that you know, you would say that because of, you know, you're part of this big war machine." I'll tell you, at that time, I didn't go over and volunteer my ass over to do this stuff to be part of a war machine. I went over to help these people. Yeah. You know, and get rid of one of the evil tyrants of our time.
Well, and you said it. I mean, you said it early on that a whole bunch of the world is an absolute hellhole.
Oh yeah,
and people just don't know. They either don't understand it or don't want to open their minds to deal with it.
Oh yeah, there's true evil out there. You know, people worried about, you know, they think about aliens or monsters and all that stuff. The real monsters are human beings. You know, it's the evil that lays in the humans' hearts that makes all the evil exist in the world. So, I mean, look at all this whole human trafficking, slavery stuff that's going on, and you know, and people being tortured to death, you know, just because of what they believe in, and across the world. It's not just
sadly it's not going to stop though.
It's not.
It's been going on for
like we were talking about
thousands
earlier,
of years.
People don't realize how good we actually have it here in the United States.
I do, Christian. Chris, I want to get to, and I know Keith wants to talk on this, but he doesn't take much credit for this, but page 272 of his book. Several years later in 2009, I got a phone call from then Staff Sergeant Kinley in Washington, D.C. He told me of a U.S. Marine Brigadier General who was in Ramstein Air Base, Germany, standing in formation, watching the Angels being unloaded one by one from a C-141 military cargo plane. While saluting, he watched the first Angel being carried off by an honor guard come down the ramp of the cargo airplane in the old style being the flag draped coffin. In a few minutes, he then saw a second flag draped transfer case come off the cargo plane, again in the old style. When the third flag draped transfer case came off, he saw our new improved style. He saw the razor sharp lines, the attention to detail, and the clean, crisp appearance of our colors. And he said to himself, damn it, I know Marines did that. So he called up CW05 Cheryl Eitz in Washington, D.C., told her of his story. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. And they called it the Bussler method.
Yep.
And you did not get any accolades for that, but nonetheless, it's been adopted by, I think, all the branches. Correct?
And now anybody who gets killed overseas or whenever they bring in remains from like past conflicts, like several years ago, North Korea, they were bringing them, repatriating them, guys from World War II.
Mm-hmm.
If they bring them over in a full size, we call them transfer cases because they're pressurized and stuff. They put on the what's called the Bussler method. It's a flag that's iron starched.
Tell us how you came up with that, though. That's the story in the book that I want to hear.
And to me, this resonated. I mean, that Bradley story and you going back and just working that scene to make sure those brothers came home.
Yeah, we ended
sisters,
up 5
whatever.
times.
I think it was that scene, wasn't it, where the Bussler method came into practice?
No, it was before that.
Was it right before? Because I know you were looking at the flags and they were pulling them out of the packaging and they had wrinkles.
The story starts on my second.
This to me resonates though, because everybody, and like I said, we never hear this side of the story, but everybody will see, whether it's your local news or whatever, a fallen soldier being offloaded off of a plane to go to the funeral home or wherever in his hometown or whatever. They see this, and you did this.
Right.
And I think that this is the most phenomenal fucking thing you could have ever have done.
It shows the care. And
in my opinion,
what he said previously, but how I remember
gives me chills, dude.
Reading about it, and you were, I think, on the loft area looking down at the
I'm leaving
processing floor. But go ahead. How do you?
The story starts back in 2004 when I was on my second deployment. Before I even went north to go back up to Iraq, and we were just got brought aboard by 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, and to be honest with you, these were some of the baddest dudes I've ever been around in my life. I was a Marine already. Being a reservist and stuff, we were just badass on the weekends. But
until you had hot sauce,
and we ended up doing the push up and stuff. But these guys were like Spartan warriors, man. I mean, they were this hardcore and very disciplined. And I thought that it was an honor to be around these guys. These guys, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, were the unit that took the Battle of the Bridges in Baghdad. They're the guys that brought down the statue in Ferdo Square. When they brought the Saddam, it's very famous.
And you talk about that.
That was them. And they ended up, I was assigned to them, and it was a privilege and an honor to be a part of that unit and for the brief amount of time that I was there with them. There I met several guys. We went to the range and stuff. I met Lance Corporal Gray. I remember him because I remember saying Gray, because I saw his name tag because we were waiting for the porta-john to get open. And I just met another guy, First Lieutenant Jimenez. And Jimenez ended up yelling at me because I had no idea who he was. We're trying to work our way into a meeting. He was coming out, didn't have his, call them blouses, but his name tape shirt what you would wear when you see but he was just had his gear on, and he told him gangway basically means get out of the way. And I'm like, who the fuck are you? And you're talking to a goddamn lieutenant. I was like, oh shit, and these guys are hardcore. Fast forward, I get blown up. I get medevaced out. I come home, and I spent my convalescent leave. When I got blown up, the first push into Fallujah, the April push, Operation Strong Resolve happened. 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines got stuck in the middle of that. They got pushed into it. Same guys that I served with, same guys I bled with, were now in the middle of that fight. When I came home, I did not want to be my head over there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky to be alive, and I wanted to spend the time with my family, with my daughter, to make that connection, and just be home. So I shut off the TV, didn't pay attention to the news. There was a day that I was supposed to leave, and that morning we went to Bob Evans, and I sat and ate breakfast with my mom and dad and my wife and my daughter. And at the end, my dad was paying. I went out and I looked at the cover of the USA Today that was there, and they had a mural on there of all the service members who were killed in Operation Iraqi Freedom to that point. And I'm like, oh, holy shit. I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that guy. I know who that guy is, and I pulled out, and I bought that paper, and I couldn't believe that Lieutenant Jimenez got killed. Corporal Amaya, Lance Corporal Gray, so many guys that I'm like, holy shit. And I remember the whole flight over, I was just blown away of how real it was, and people, the last time I saw them, were vibrant. They were, here for a mission. They're here to do America's bidding. America asked them to go to war. They answered that call. And now to think of them no longer here was, like a slap in the face, especially, and I started feeling guilty because even though it was out of my power, I felt guilty that I wasn't there with them. There's a thing about guilt that it doesn't have to operate in the realm of reality. Because after the fact of whatever transpired, should have been faster, you should have been stronger, you should have known, you could have been there to make a difference. And I felt that I should have been there, even though that IED cheated me of being there with them. And it's totally out of my power. So in there at the barracks, and the guys who were wounded were showing up now over at the barracks, and they were telling me how Lieutenant Jimenez got killed and all these other guys. And it's kind of like it beats people being in a state of shock, just reflecting on it and stuff. And there's nobody else to talk to but a bunch of drunk Marines sitting out in the middle of the desert. So fast forward, I volunteered to go back over again. And now I'm in charge in the very same building that these people were brought into. Fallujah is right outside. I could see the city lights from the top of my bunker. So their remains came through my building that I was now in charge of. And when we did a transfer of authority, basically, we watch the people for the first week of who we're replacing. And then the second week, they watch us. And I remember it was a U.S. Army major that had came in, Major Gregory Fester from Grand Rapids, Michigan, had came in. And he was on the road crews that fix all the IEDs. And they were out there looking at not to fix the IEDs, but to fix the craters for the IEDs. I'm sorry. And so they're out there on the highway and they're looking, and it was him and his first sergeant was still in the vehicle. He goes over to looks in and say, what kind of assets they need, what kind of equipment they need to bring in so they can fix this stuff to keep the Iraqi people on our side. We're helping your country, that kind of stuff. And he goes up and he starts looking at it, and that's when the IED goes off. They had reburied another IED inside that same crater, and it ended up taking his life. So they bring him in, and I see that they're working. When we're watching them, and they get time to the part where they're putting the flag on to the transfer case. It's nothing against these guys. These guys were professionals. They just did everything that they, as we've always done, going back to the Civil War. They just take a brand new American flag straight out of the cardboard box. They put it on top of the transfer case, and they tie it on, and they put it on, and they tie a white cord around there. And they still had all the creases of it being inside the box. And I thought that was fucked up.
Yeah.
You went down in the PX, didn't you, that night?
Yeah. It took me a couple days, but I thought it was fucked up that if this was the flag that was supposed to follow the remains all the way back home, and if this is the flag that's supposed to be given to his wife, his daughter, his mother, his father, that it wasn't treated with the utmost respect that he deserves, because that flag is not just the representation of the United States. That flag is a direct representation of his service to our nation. Absolutely. So, and to me, that flag should not be tarnished. That flag they should come back impeccable. It should be as the best condition that we can to honor him. Honor his service, not only his service that he bled for, but to the service that his wife and his children will still go on for the rest of their lives. You know, that's a hole that's cut out of their lives that can never be filled. So to honor their service that's ongoing from now until the end of time. I've had friends over at the VFW who still grieve for their brothers that they lost over in Vietnam.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, and that's a grief that doesn't go away, you know. And that flag is not a flag that gets tossed into into a trash can. That's a flag that you hang on your mantle.
Yep.
And that's passed down from generation to generation.
Absolutely.
So I was thinking, if my family, my guys that I bled with, my guys that I went forward with, the guys who paid that cost, that flag needs to be treated the utmost way. So after the other unit left, I went down to the PX and I saw that they had one can of starch, one iron, and one ironing board.
You got a cross look from the lady, didn't you?
No, you're not supposed to put starch on anything when you're deployed, because starch is a reflective material with infrared. You'll glow up. You'll glow in the middle of the night if somebody uses IR on you, and you don't want to use that. So you don't use it in combat. So there's no reason for starch to be there.
And you think sand hurts in your gentle places? Fuck, starch colored shirts, baby.
So I go down there, and stuff has been there so long. You've got this film of sand and grease that's on top of it, right? And I bought their one can of starch. I go there the next day to the PX, and there's two. So I bought two, and I go there the next day, there's four. So it kept on doubling up every time I go in there. And so one day I go down there, and Gunnery Sergeant Lewandowski, he was part of the staff, and he goes, "Where are you going, Bus?" I'm like, "I'm going back down to the PX to go down and buy every can of starch they have down there." What the fuck are you doing with starch over here over in Iraq? You're not even supposed to use that shit here. He's like, you're not trying to look good for the enemy, are you? And I'm like, no, because I'm ironing and starching every American flag before you put them on the transfer cases. So I saw that you just turned the picture there.
Yep. He's got do you got the pic of him and
no, he doesn't have that.
Okay.
So I didn't send that to him. There's a picture in the book, and what had happened in that particular unit, it was a Army Reserve out of Michigan. I didn't find this out until after I started talking to the first sergeant that was the accompany his.
You talked to his family too, right?
He was
the brother-in-law.
Remain. What had happened was that major, the person that was accompanying him, was his brother-in-law.
Yeah,
was married to his sister. So he was there to accompany the remains all the way back to the United States. And I was thinking, wow, that's got to be tough. That he knows something right now that his sister.
Oh shit! Know. You tied this up in the ass end of the book, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I
think you do.
So, what we did was, I remember one night sitting there, and what the problem was with the other flags was the way it was done to the old style. One, it didn't look right, but two, is it. When you put the remains down on the floor of a C-130, C-141 of an airplane, the flag touches the ground. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing you never do, is you allow our colors to ever touch the ground. Yep. That's the total disrespect. So what I did is, at first, for the first few remains, I ended up getting some safety pins from the PX, and I would figure out how a way to put them down there. And I think we did 3 remains with the safety pins to get it up off the ground. And then just one night I just had an epiphany, a eureka moment. And then I just tied the white cord around first, 2 fisherman's knots, 2 slip knots, and tightened it down. And we took this flag that was highly starched and gleaming in the light, that we would fold it underneath. Now, we would have the pilots that would make the run at midnight, and they would go from base to base to base, picking up all the remains before they fly down south. And there was one night that I used to spot check the guys who used to take the remains down and make sure that they're doing their jobs right, and that I'm paying attention to them, that, it's 3:00 in the morning when they're making this trek down there to the flight line. And I go down there, and one of the pilots was like, you guys are the only ones in the country that does what you do. Don't take this the wrong way, but we like picking up your remains. That you could see the level of care that you put into this. And I just want to say that, we thank you for doing what you do. So years down the road, I left Iraq, and the last thing I wanted to think about is Iraq.
Sure.
And I'm going through all my troubles with PTSD and adjusting survivor's guilt, all that kind of stuff. And that's when I get that phone call from Kinley, and him telling me that they're adopting it, and they made it where it's standard now. From now, it was a funny thing is that, you never know how much of an impact you make, until after the fact. And I wasn't trying to do it for anything. I just thought that it was the right thing to do.
You're doing it for them.
I'm doing it for them
and their family,
and to everybody who had went over and sacrificed their lives. It was for them, and it was something to honor them and honor their families. I never got any, no attaboys or anything from the military, but I didn't do it for them. I did it for Jimenez and Gray and Amaya and everybody else.
I think it shows. It truly does.
I think you did it for the right reasons. Yeah. You don't. We all want to get a pat on the back, but for something like this, with that reverence, that's all you need. Yeah. And the fact that somebody saw in what you did, and they adopted that as a standard, I think is absolutely phenomenal.
God, yeah. Shows that the government can change, which is nice.
Wow.
But you are correct, though, Chris. What you were saying, my dad's is still on our mantle. My wife's grandparents. It is something that's passed down,
right? Because it's, and whenever you look at that, you think of them, and it's something that I want those family members to be able to look up there and not only think of their loved one, but to think that there were people that gave a shit about them
over there,
in a place that hates them.
And
there's the guys that are willing to stand up and change it for them.
Those guys weren't alone, obviously, because they have brothers in arms, but they had somebody after the fact when those other brothers were still going out to go do the stuff.
Yeah.
They were left in good care.
Right.
And I think that speaks volumes.
That was something that we used to have little ceremonies, because whenever the units would drop off their dead, when they drop off their fallen to us, you see a whole gamut of emotions. And that's the thing about the job. You have to wear so many different hats of, the tactical hat, the role of the leader. You're kind of like a funeral director at some points, because at the very end, after we're done processing, we would say a prayer around the remains would be there. And we would all gather around. I mean, I've seen first sergeants cry like little babies.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's hard, man. And I mean, with what you did over there and everything that you have to come back and deal with on your, with your family, but I mean, on your own, in your own head, but with your family, you're seeing more than a lot of people that are deployed out. You're seeing it all.
I see more death than 99% of the military.
Yeah.
And most coroners in the United States.
I think over a lifetime, most of those guys would see a lot more, but I have a lot more concentrated in this 6-7 month period.
For a reason, though.
Yeah.
I mean, a valiant reason, to be honest. I'm gonna dial it down a little bit, a little levity here, because that was a little deep. You still slinging mail?
No, I left a long time ago. I came back home and I had a really rough time adjusting. I ended up leaving the post office because I had to. I was at that time in my life, I felt like everything was slipping out of my grasp. A point where the PTSD was, to say it lightly, it was kicking my ass. It was destroying everything I had. My marriage, relationship with my mom, dad. I felt guilty that I was still alive after so many guys had spent their lives. They sacrificed their lives. My guys were still deploying, and I felt like a little bitch because
there's a lot of people that we've talked to on this podcast in regards to survivor guilt, and we talk about it all the time about how it's good. Our generation, instead of sucking it up and deal with it, pussy, it's okay to talk about it, and everybody hopefully finds that avenue that works for them.
We brought it up like with the fire side. We have
First
just now in
military,
police and fire personnel. We've gotten better in the last 5 years of having these what we call them face teams. Hey, contact this person. You have somebody to talk to. Where when he was a police officer, way back when I got in, it was, hey, suck it up, kid. Next run's coming in. We're not talking about it. So to be able to get it out, and
I've got a good friend
huge.
of mine that came back a couple of tours in Iraq. He was a gunner on Humvee, and I'm going to hook you up with him too, because he would love. He was Army. He was a reservist, so he really didn't go over and do much. I'm joking. That's sarcastic as fuck because of the reserve aspect. Gunner on a Humvee. I think he did 3 tours maybe. But he started a nonprofit and deals with PTSD by fishing and everything else. So he's finally gotten a handle on his demons, hopefully, and he's doing real well. I saw him a couple months ago, but it's a great organization, and you guys do so much even after you give everything. And when you come back to the States, you do so much else for your brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And that's just amazing. That's a different brand of person that is constantly giving. And I appreciate you giving us your story today in your book, as well as being here today for an extended period of time. And
Especially live.
Yeah.
I
Can't thank you enough for being
gave
here.
me the option of
It's
virtual.
my honor to be here.
He was like, I want to be here. I was
Chris
like, you know what?
Bussler.
We want it.
United States Marine Corps retired. No tougher duty, no greater honor.
You can get it on Amazon.
That's the book.
Any place else?
Amazon's on Audible if you want to listen to it.
Did you read yours like Dexter?
No, I can't read.
Well, Dexter thought he couldn't either. We had him on our podcast. He was talking
You
about
can
doing
write.
the
You can
Audible.
write like hell, but you can't read. That's awesome.
I'm not a good reader, but my narrator is a guy named John Pruden. He's a Audi winner, which is like kind of like the voice actors Grammys, or Oscars. He is the same narrator did American Sniper, and he's done like I believe over 300 books.
How about that?
He's an excellent, outstanding guy. He was a Black Hawk pilot as well.
If you guys got some time in a car coming up, get the Audible version. You can listen to it. If you're a reader, this is a page turner. I was telling his wife, Wendy, who was here, that I think, 2 Wednesdays ago, I was so pissed. I had court at 8:30 and I started reading it at 10 outside smoking a cigar. Next thing I know, it's 3 a.m. I'm like, what the
Same
fuck?
thing.
I got to go inside.
You blasted us both.
Yeah. And then I stayed up till 6:30 reading the damn thing. And I was like, shit, I might as well just get up. I hadn't pulled an all-nighter since college, man. But I pulled an all-nighter reading your book.
We got old ladies.
All I want is an autograph before you leave.
Absolutely.
I'm going to get one too. And
we had old ladies going, are you coming to bed yet? I'm like, not yet. Not yet. I got another chapter or two.
But yeah, no, I thought it was going to take a great turn with the tight bloused nurse, but that kind of kept my interest for a little bit. I was looking around. Are any neighbors out right now looking?
You've met Rob now. You know exactly where Rob's purview is.
We understand what his normal reading material is.
Yes.
Now. Yeah.
Well, normally it's 3 minutes of video on X videos, but nonetheless, this is a great read. Pick it up at Amazon or any place that books are sold.
Kindle.
Kindle. That's how I started it. But if you're doing Kindle, make sure you get the version that you buy instead of rent, because I had to buy the book. I was going to buy it anyways because they shut it down 3 days later. I was like, son of a bitch, I have 150 pages left.
You're probably drunk, and there was a drunk Kindle buy. He usually does drunk Amazon buys.
Yeah, I normally don't. Don't look at my trunk.
The only thing I ask is that everybody leaves a review.
Yes,
because it's hard to get reviews. The more reviews you get on Amazon, the more that they pump it out to other feeds. I'm a poor little disabled veteran. I don't get. I'd get the little bit of the government dole, so I don't invest any money into it. It's just all word of mouth that it's gotten into this.
Well, hopefully we'll sell some books for you.
It's a hell of a story,
and this networking here, just like with the podcast Failure to Stop, Dexter Pitts. Yeah, we always push ratings and reviews. Rate his book, get his book. If you need help getting the book, get with us. Like we said on our last podcast, we'll set you up.
For those that are here, hit the fucking ATM. You're buying a book. And is this confirmed 8:00 tonight?
8:00. I'm on 700 WLW. Chris is going to be my guest at 8:00, and we'll talk more about a way shorter version of what we did here today, but it's still going to be good
on the big one.
And hopefully we'll sell some books on 700 WLW tonight, 8:00. And 8:05 actually after the news, but we're looking forward to that. Chris, can't thank you enough for being here.
Your story, and like I told you before we started, we didn't have a time frame because that's the story that you're telling is a story that's not told or hasn't been told.
No,
and people don't know that, and we need to honor the people that are coming home, fighting for us.
Yep.
And you putting the care and everything that you did while you were over there, getting hurt, going back over. I can't appreciate you enough, man. Thank you so much.
And I know we can't see all the folks that are over here. Can we get one more round of applause for Chris Bussler as we wrap it up?
Thank you guys
all very much.
Thank you guys for coming down. I know there's some Marines over there that want to talk to you and meet you now that they've heard your story. We just thank Engraved in USA for the great
job,
product.
Rich. Thank you.
Awesome.
And
Thank you.
for all they do for us, and we appreciate it. And this is gonna flip your lid a little bit.
Yeah, don't be thrown off.
Didn't warn them on this one. But we did. Engraved in USA got you something else, Dan, because you will not answer the fucking question if you manscape. So we got you some ball wipes, buddy, from Manscapes. Do you manscape, Dan?